Hi, I'm John Montgomery, one of the co-founders of FX PhD, and we just announced our new July term, and we've got a fantastic lineup of courses. Now, one of the things that we want to talk about, though, at FX PhD are our bonus extras, and those are the things that you get along with the courses that you paid for. First and foremost, we have our online discussion forums. It's a great way to interact with other members, as well as ask questions of the profs. We also have a wide variety of software available for you to use on the VPN so that you can follow along with the courses as well as build shots for your reel. These are the full-on versions, and you basically connect to our site, get a secure connection, and get your license that way. And last but not least, we have Background Fundamentals, which is our weekly magazine-style course covering the fundamentals of visual effects. It's designed to keep you up to date with what's going on in the field of visual effects. In this term, we have a really special focus, and that's conversations with visual effects supervisors from around the world. In order to give you a taste of Background Fundamentals, we thought we'd share part of the first class that's running this term at fxphd.com.
Hi, and welcome to this term at FX PhD in Background Fundamentals. What we're going to do is a series this term that looks at what it is to be a visual effects supervisor, how to get into the industry, what they do on a day-to-day basis, how they go around running projects, but also tips and techniques, specifically educational aspects about what they do. This is quite different from the interviews we might do around a film where we're really focused on how did they do this or that shot, what was the sequencing, the order, what was it like to work with the director. We did this once before, about 4 or 5 years ago, and it was really informative. So we're going to start this week with Andrew Jackson, who did Fool's Gold and The Knowing, but most recently did Mad Max Fury Road. Now, I worked with Andrew for a few years, a couple of years back, obviously before FX PhD, really learnt to respect him. He's actually a very accomplished digital artist, though he tends to focus on the fact that he came to VFX from special effects. He's a very mechanically minded individual. He's really hands-on, and he has such a refreshing perspective on the world. He does terrific work, and he was very, very generous with his time. In fact, we have like almost 2 hours of material we've cut down. This is still longer than I like a class to be, but I hope you'll agree it's worthwhile. In upcoming weeks, we're going to be sitting down with people like Rob Coleman from Animal Logic, guys from Weta, from ILM, from all over in the world, as we put together this package. We'll be filming more stuff at SIGGRAPH in Los Angeles and trying to give you these kind of in-depth looks as to what it takes to be a supervisor. This work is, as I say, kind of particularly different from that which we normally do. We normally do different classes each week, but for just one term, I think it's kind of good to have a look at this from a different perspective. And I've got to say, I can't begin to thank the supervisors involved. Some of them are literally on 6-day weeks at the moment. So they're working 6 days a week shooting, they're in the middle of production, and on that one day off they have in the week, they're actually going to come into the studios and sit down to talk about their work. So just really great stuff. Anyway, I hope you enjoy this first of our series this term on talking to supervisors about the art of being a visual effects supervisor. So Andrew, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Have you recovered from your recent exploits?
Yes, yeah, I've been. It's been quite relaxed for the last few weeks. Although I am still actually working on a few last little bits and pieces for the DVD extras and making of and various things.
So when you first hear about a project, how far into it? I mean, how much advice do you give before you officially kind of go on the clock and become actually sort of a paid part of the production? How much do you have to sort of give up front before you get in on any production just to sort of secure the job?
I mean, I would spend a fair bit of time looking at a project and thinking about what all of the challenges might be in that project. But I'd have to say, though, that I don't have a lot of experience of being in the position where I'm not on a payroll of any sort, because I've worked out of visual effects companies most of my career, and so before Fury Road, I was supervisor for Knowing, but I was still employed by Animal Logic at the time. So, you know, I'd be essentially working for Animal Logic and being paid by them to do the breakdown or whatever work was required to secure the job.
So the same thing applies, right? I mean, in the case of a visual effects like Animal, I guess the question is like, how much work does Animal have to do, or do you have to do at Animal? Because Animal's not anything but its employees.
Yeah.
Before you actually sort of get the job? I'm just trying to get an idea, like, is there an expensive part of the process in terms of just the pitch? Do you have to give away a lot of stuff to sort of win their confidence generally, or?
Yeah, I think a lot of post houses do a lot of work, a lot of supervisor work, breaking down scripts and thinking about how it might be done, but also tests, like 3D tests, and quite a fair bit of work gets put into winning a job.
Yeah, it's a huge commitment of time, and I have to say, in the case of films like one you've just been on, sometimes those films you can work on them and they just get pushed back for a few years, or they just don't happen. Or it's quite a career move in one sense and quite a career risk in another, isn't it?
Yeah, it certainly makes you think twice about what your next job will be, because it is such a big commitment, and you spend a lot of years of your life. And in visual effects particularly, because we're there from the very beginning, well, in the best case scenario anyway, we're there from the very beginning, right through pre-production, the shoot, and post-production. So it's really one of the longest lasting departments on a film production.
Now, I know in some of the projects you've worked on, you've really had a script, and in other projects it's been more of a sort of a storyboard type experience. But when you start, and I'm just going to use the script in the kind of abstract sense of a concept, do you break down everything, or do you want to have meetings with everybody else to kind of work out where you're at before you start breaking down? How do you approach a script or a project?
I mean, obviously every project varies dramatically in what the type of visual effects are required, and I guess my first approach would be to read the script and very quickly try and get a lot of reference material, the director's other work, have a look at the type of effects that are required, and look at how other people have solved the same things. Look at a lot of photographic reference.
So this isn't sort of reference for solving the final film. This is more reference as to the context you might be working in.
For everything, I suppose, it's just to help you get your head into the world that film requires, I suppose. And I do that by looking at pictures, still and moving. So that's kind of my first response is to look at what the sort of things that are going to be required, and then just fill your head with that stuff, with the stuff that is going to be required for that film, so you understand how that particular thing works in the real world, and so look at a video reference of those things and how they behave, and as well as obviously the creative side, which is, comes from looking at the director's work and what other sort of projects they've done, how they might work. And also there may be other departments that have been on the film already and have already done quite a lot of creative work. So you definitely want to make sure that you're not doubling up on work that's already been done by another person. In the art department, there's a lot of design work and production designers. So really just immersing yourself in that world, or whatever the effects that are likely to be required for that film, so you completely understand the requirements, I suppose, of those objects. And I can never underestimate the importance of finding reference and looking at reference, and quite often the reference for the thing you want doesn't exist. So make your own, shoot something, do little tests of simple things, and just see how the world behaves, how the real world actually functions.
So I'm going to hit that point really strongly in 1 second, but just before I do, I want to ask you one other thing, which is because you're one of the most inventive guys I know, and I mean that as a real compliment, right? Really think things through and try and find a good, simple, elegant, inventive solution. Let's say you get one or two of those over a script, like, well, I've got an idea, that'd be clever. Do you basically file those away for, I'll see if that's relevant and then I'll bring them up, or are you keen early on to get those out on the table because you want to establish that, let's collaborate, here are some ideas, or is it more like I'm going to hang back because I just don't want to sort of come in and look like I'm not showing off, but trying to impose something?
I suppose that that kind of relates to another major issue when you're starting on a job, which is that you really want to establish good working relationship, collaborative working relationship with all the other departments on a project, and the early days are so crucial to that. And so I always try. Well, you want to establish some credentials, I guess, for want of a better word, but you want people to understand the sort of things that I'm likely to be able to bring to the project, and I guess picking the best point to bring up like a radical new solution, because you're right, I do tend to come up with some sort of unusual solutions to things, and until you've established a little bit of trust with other departments, you just get laughed at if you're not careful. So it's important to sort of play that, to kind of engage with the other people and make sure that everyone understands where everyone's coming from, and also in the early part of a job, I put a lot of effort into establishing a really good working relationship with those other departments, and I'll go out of my way to be really helpful to the various departments, because in visual effects quite often we have a lot of information that is incredibly valuable. Like we've done previs and we've got possibly concept work, or we've got three-dimensional models of what the end result is going to look like, or the environment that it's going to be in, which a lot of people don't have any idea of, and they would desperately love to know. I mean, information is one of the hardest things to come by quite often on a film shoot, because it doesn't always get disseminated effectively to everyone, and so,
because that's the criticism I've heard, that you can be in a production and literally that first pre-production phase, instead of being some collaborative nirvana where you're all sitting around coming up with clever ideas, you're just trying to get across the information. Like, does anyone have an idea what this car looks like? Does anyone know what this house is? Does anyone know basically what this car running into the house is meant to look like? Was that, and so you're just acting like an information data exchange place until you finally settle down some point either in or after the production to actually kind of, and then, of course, the problem is, well, we could have done this better had we had a bit more time up front to think about it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you do become or you certainly have the potential to become a sort of information library, but it works both ways, because I mean, there's a lot of stuff that I don't know about that's being done by the art department. They're building sets and.
But that's one of my point is, like, you have to actually be interchanging with so many departments. Let me get back to this point you made earlier about this coming up with ideas thing, because the other thing that is characteristic, and I know you well enough to say this, is that you won't just come up with the idea. You'll normally come up with the idea and then an iPhone test of it, or an elaborate little rig that you've built. You won't just say, I think that there's a possibility that if we did something it might be cool. You'll say, I had this idea, so I built this in my shed, and here's a scale model kind of thing. And that's pretty much how you like to operate, isn't it?
I love to operate like that. And there's definitely, if you're presenting an unusual idea, it's a lot more likely to be listened to if you can show some evidence that actually it's a good idea and it would work. So I love to shoot the little tests and
just to frame this for people, these can be as, I'm not going to say wacky, but we're not talking about building like scale miniatures with sort of, $100,000 budgets. We're talking about building kind of bent aluminium bits of foil almost that kind of vaguely resemble the thing we're talking about, but effectively show the point.
Absolutely. The best tests are the ones that take very little time, but completely show the idea. So I'll do the quickest possible test to show that this, in principle, this idea works. So, that you were referring to before, something we might have talked about, a little test that I set up for a shot in Fury Road where vehicles being hit by another vehicle, and there was some discussion or debate, I should say, about whether being hit would bend one way or the other way, and so just setting up a simple little bent foil car with two wheels and some weights in it and hitting it with a wedge and a sledgehammer to see what happened. So just watching how does something bend when it gets hit here and the weight is predominantly here, and so those little ideas. Just another one that I came up with. It was just something that a discussion that we were having on set about where rocks would fall if you exploded the wall. And this is again from the Fury Road film where there was a story point in the film where some charge was let off on a cliff and dropped a whole pile of rocks into a very narrow opening. And there was debate about what that pile of rocks might look like after that's happened, and they were in a very neat pile, and I would argue that they wouldn't be as neat, they would scatter more broadly. So I just got a little handful of rocks, and with an iPhone shooting at a high frame rate, dropped them onto another rock and watched how they fell and rolled and what shape they were, and showed George, and he went, "Oh, great! That's really good." Because before they were a bit too neat, and now they were, a little bit more.
So I want to know, when you go about doing these things, is it part of your process from an exploratory point of view, or do you kind of like know what you're going, you're making the experiment to kind of not prove the point, but illustrate the point? Because it feels like it's a bit of both. It feels like you're yourself curious as to which way the car would bend, and you think you know, but you want to test it.
I'm more than happy to be proved wrong. If I have an idea and the test shows completely the opposite, then that's great. At least we all know. And it's certainly explorative as much as it is trying to prove a point.
And I should point out, we're sort of talking about things that sound like you're in production, but a lot of these tests and these experiments might be done in pre-production just to work stuff out. I mean, you're not adverse to doing things for the entire production, I know, but we were just framing the discussion in the early stages when, of course, it can be incredibly informative and so much cheaper to do kind of before anything starts.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. No, but you're right. Those sort of ideas and exploratory tests happen, for me anyway. They happen all the way through, the shoot and the post, because it's never too late to add some extra bits or change things.
In fact, that's not uncommon, is it, in visual effects, that a supervisor will end up shooting second unit. And then I think in your case, you've ended up shooting second unit that actually really wasn't so much visual effects, just that you're the only guy standing that was in a position to understand how the director wanted it sort of done.
Yeah, that's right. And I mean, I guess one of the things about being on a film shoot is that it can be absolute chaos, and nothing. Well, I won't say nothing ever goes according to plan, but certainly plans change a lot. And towards the end of a shooting schedule, things can certainly get a bit frantic, and there's still lists of things that need to be shot that haven't been ticked off yet. And it comes down to whoever can do it gets sent off with a camera and a crew and just shoot somebody standing there doing this.
Do you enjoy that?
I love it. Yeah, I love the whole shoot experience, and I really enjoy that the unpredictable.
I've always found it really stressful for exactly the same reasons. That it's like a car crash that you have to get at the moment that it happens, and if you've missed it, too bad, because we're moving on. And I've just hated that kind of sense that I've got today to get this thing, and if for whatever reason I can't make it happen today, then we've moved on.
Yeah, although the film industry is so good at coping with disappointment, like reworking the schedule, like if something doesn't happen, and because it's so frequent that something stops the plan, things get rescheduled, and so you can't just hold on to today's plan, and because you'll do the absolute best you can to get it done, but if it doesn't for some reason, it's usually not the end of the world.
So one of the things I wanted to talk to you about now is we go into post-production, or at least away from principal photography. There's a lot of people that seem to just assume, oh well, we'll just do a CG one of those, because CG seems to be like an easy solution. And I do mean easy as in that it's going to be hard work to necessarily do this other thing, and surely you can just press a button and that happens, which is, we know, a bit facetious and a bit rude, but it's actually a genuinely held belief in the industry. But you kind of run contrary to that. In fact, you'll go to great lengths to just do stuff. To either, and we talked about reference, but I mean actually do stuff for real that goes in the film.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I suppose it comes back to my previous career, if you like, is in the practical world, and model making and doing practical effects for film. So that I'm very comfortable in that place, and quite often when I look at a little element that's required for a shot just to make the difference between something working and not working, I immediately, I always, I suppose, first look at why can't we shoot this if it exists in the real world and it's not incredibly complicated to shoot it. So that goes for during the main shoot as well as in post. But I don't stop doing that just because the shoot is over. So there's really no reason why, if you've got a little bit of space somewhere and you've got a green screen or a black and the things that you need, and these days you can shoot elements on a digital still camera, or there's really no kind of barrier to continuing to shoot visual effects elements after the principal photography is over.
Now I know and we just documented this on FX Guide, that you actually shot some dust elements on an iPhone for Mad Max, but I want to go back further. I remember you set fire to things at your own property just to film stuff for the Knowing.
That's true, I did. A tree.
Tell me about
only
that.
A small part of a tree. It was, we just needed some burning branches quite close to the camera with flames coming off of some branches, and we've got a property in the bush where I've got a bit of space, and so it was a fairly straightforward process to just use a piece of an old dead tree branch and possibly a bit of petrol and shoot it at night, so we didn't need any.
Is this for the plane crash in the night?
No, it was in the dream sequence,
right,
where there was a whole lot of fire, burning forest out through the window of the boys' bedroom window.
Bedroom window, yeah.
And so shooting at night, so against a fairly open space, so we didn't need any black or green screen or anything. And I think at the same time I shot just lots of little burning elements of little pots of fuel and twigs on the ground burning. Those sort of live action, like a library of that sort of material, you can get so much so quickly once you've gone to the trouble of actually getting the bits together, compared to, for example, making a burning tree in a CG burning tree is a huge task. So you can get an enormous amount of payoff for really not that much effort.
And you don't even mind if somebody else has sort of bid it as a CG shot. I think you did something, didn't you, on Fool's Gold like that?
Yeah, there's just that was during the shoot, but I'm always looking for, I guess, not necessarily the best way, but the way that I love the randomness that you get from the real world, and I find that in a CG simulation we can put in all of the theoretical randomness that you want, but it's one of the hardest things to achieve is a genuine natural random event, and the real world does that so well. That's kind of, as always, my first port of call. There was a shot in Fool's Gold where a boat was sinking. It was an underwater shot of a boat hitting the bottom after being blown up, and that point where it hit the seabed and that big cloud of sort of rolling sand dust cloud was bid as a CG effect, and I just felt that we could relatively easily shoot something. So we did, the whole shoot was on boats, so we had access to lots of boats, and one of the boats that was on the shoot was a fishing trawler, which had a bit of a crane, and we found some big metal plates and a big block of concrete, and we chained them all together, and we dropped it over the side on the rope, so it was controlled, so we could just drop it and lift it and drop it, and we put down the camera, and
that's what's in the film.
That's what's in the film, yeah.
Tell me, when you're putting stuff together like that, do you, well, maybe not so much that one, because that's obviously, and I think you said in principal photography, but let's say you're putting stuff together with like the burning tree or whatever. How quickly do you want to show those shots to the director, like even if it's a full-on effect shot? Do you like to get stuff pretty right because it's going to scare the bajillikins out of them to see a really badly comped bit of burning tree in the foreground that maybe isn't integrated yet? Or do you want to just get the idea and see if it's the wrong direction?
I think with live action elements, it's quite safe to show them fairly early. Like you can do. There's something really incredibly valuable about photographic elements that people believe them way more than a CG element that's where you have to say, imagine what it's going to look like when this is finished. But if you put a photographic element into a shot, roughly comped together, bashed together, people they completely understand what it is. It's a much easier sell to put photographs together roughly to get an idea across than it is to.
So you'd put the photographic collage slam comp earlier than you'd show the
way
CG.
earlier, yeah.
Right.
I think deciding when to show work is a really, it's always a difficult problem because it's very difficult, and everyone, it's not just directors. Everyone has trouble imagining what something's going to look like when it's fully textured and lit and everything's beautiful. And what I like to do, because the danger obviously is that you show something too early, and through no fault of their own, the director might just decide that the whole thing is wrong and try and fix it in a way that isn't actually the problem, because maybe it wasn't wrong, it was just that it didn't look nice yet. So that's one issue. And then if you go too late, if you wait until it is finished and perfect and looks beautiful and before you show it, but there's something else about the shot that's not right, they want to reframe it or change the camera, then a whole lot of work gets wasted because it's been taken too far without it being signed off. So what I like to do, if it's feasible, is to take something to a very highly finished level, an example of a character or whatever whatever the effect is, do a test, but do it really well, completely finished, absolutely convincing and beautiful, which will buy you the confidence of the director to know that, okay, so this grey thing, when it's finished, it's going to look that good. It's going to be completely convincing, and we'll buy it. And so they then can imagine that whenever they look at the grey sort of post-viz version.
Does that mean that when you're showing these shots, because we've been talking about showing the director, you show them in context, or do you show shots in isolation?
I always try and show context, and most directors want to see context as well, because it's so important. You can't just focus on solving a shot. If when you've got it perfect, you then drop it in the edit and realize that it completely destroys the shots around it. So context is so important.
So there's less call now for giant oversized joke irons. So my question to you would be, what advice for sort of younger artists? What do you recognize things that are helpful for people as they're trying to gain some of those practical skills, coming probably now from an initial starting point of CG as opposed to your initial point of practical?
Well, I guess that my advice to everyone always is, if you're trying to break into a new industry, is to do your own work if you can. Like, just do stuff, because the ability to, someone's ability to motivate themselves to get up and do things to show is so it's so good when you're hiring people to see that this person has actually got it together to do all of this themselves, and you can see so much more about the person than someone saying this is what they'd like to do in the future. But so that's one thing. The other advice I think is always that, it's kind of a recurring theme from a discussion, but get out and experience the real world. You can't learn everything from a computer. You have to actually know how things really do work in the real world. That how gravity and materials behave, and how things bend and how things break and all that stuff.
I'm afraid I've said this far too many times, but it is my all-time favourite comment from my father, who once actually said to me, "You can read the entire works of Sigmund Freud, but sooner or later you've got to take a girl on a date."
Yeah.
And there is an advantage, I think, in getting out there with a camera, any camera, anything that has lenses, and and just doing photography, making stuff, shooting stuff, even if it's not a narrative form, just even stills, and learning what a 50 is, what a 32 is going to give you, and
absolutely
understanding how
it'll give you so much important information when you're on set talking to the camera department who live cameras. That's the thing that they deal with all day and every day.
But you live cameras too, so that's the thing. Like I think you just couldn't function without your camera.
No, that's true. Yeah, but it isn't my only.
It's not your only pen.
Yeah.
But it's invaluable to succeeding in your job. From me knowing you, it just and also it adds production value. I mean,
absolutely, yeah. Just like understanding, as you said, about lenses and film backs and resolution and what changes with shutter speeds and how that relates to shutter angles and frames per second, and having all of that stuff, being a little bit more familiar with all of that camera and filmmaking terminology will make life a lot easier on set as well. As just understanding fundamentals of how cameras work.
Yeah, I mean, there is nothing beating experience, but that experience doesn't have to be 50 years of doing this job. It can be experience in a wide range of areas that you can then bring to it. Because as you say, like, you don't want to get that thing where somebody imagines that they know how things are or second guesses how things might be. It'd be really great to be able to just look at the real thing or take some shots of it. Yeah,
one thing that is incredibly valuable is doing rough Photoshop comps of still images and putting things together and working out how angles and relative position of camera to subject matter, and as much or if not more than lenses. Like, that's one big lesson that a lot of visual effects people don't necessarily get, is that it doesn't matter what the lenses are. If the two things are the same distance apart, then that element will fit into that shot. You just have to scale it differently. But people get obsessed with things like lenses being identical, but they don't actually matter, especially if the object you're photographing doesn't reach the edge of the frame. You can put that into a much wider lens shot if it was photographed from the same distance. But then also knowing what doesn't matter. Like humans, we don't have any straight lines, and we're very forgiving. You can squeeze us into a shot that's completely wrong and no one can tell. Whereas a cube,
cars,
you can't cheat at all.
Yeah, you really notice those perspective lines, don't you?
Yeah. And so you get a lot of that from still photography just as much as you would from movie photography, and you can do all of that by taking a lot of photographs and just understanding all of how those bits fit together.
Well, that's just a bit of our first class of background fundamentals this term, and as Mike likes to say, it's sure to be a cracker. Again, that's just one of the bonus extras, including forums and software that you get in addition to all the great learning from the regular courses that we have on offer. Head on over to fxphd.com to check out the site, and we hope to see you in the forums.